Welcome to the Carl B. Phillips Show, hosted by gospel music industry veteran, recording artist, songwriter, producer, radio announcer, and actor, Carl B. Phillips. Join Carl as he talks with gospel recording artists, producers, songwriters, pastors, and other creatives about music, ministry, and life. Get ready for another great conversation on the Carl B. Phillips Show.
This week's guest on the Carl B. Phillips Show, travel agent and a co-owner of All Nations TV, Milton Wallace. Welcome to the Carl B. Phillips Show. I am Carl B. Phillips. Today's guest is a husband, retired educator. He's a travel agent, and he's the co-owner of All Nations TV. Please help me welcome Milton Wallace. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening to you as well. I'm doing well. Cannot complain.
All righty. Well, as I told you, I'm going to ask two random questions. The first random question, would you rather be the funniest person in the room or the smartest person in the room?
Oh, that really is a hard question because I probably would rather be the smartest person in the room because at that point, I know when to shut up. And because if I'm going to try to be the funniest person in the room, people going to get sick of you. Because you always trying to come up with something to make people laugh. And sometimes that can be irritating as well as entertaining. But if you're the smartest person where you can use the wisdom that you have from being smart to know that, okay, I've said enough, so now I need to shut up and go sit down. So that's the way I look at that.
What's one of the jokes that you like telling?
I really don't have any. I don't have any jokes to tell. I don't know any jokes to tell people. Not really.
Okay, just depending on what's happening at that moment, you'll make something funny out of it.
Yeah, if it's funny, yeah. But as far as I'm usually so focused on everything that I hardly ever. I guess me and fun we don't mix too well much. I mean, I work all the
time. Yeah, sometimes as creative people, we're focused, and you don't have time to be unfocused. You're
right,
always...
and that's pretty much how my life is. It's 24/7, and I'm pretty much working most of the time doing something. But as far as just saying I took off and went, now I might do some traveling or something like that. But as far as going to go hang out, do bowling, do something, I don't have time for that, or I don't take time. Let me say it like that. I don't take time for that.
Well, it was interesting because when I was reading your bio, I found out that you and I have something in common. We're both only children.
Right.
And as only children, we love kind of our alone time. You're not used to being around people.
When I was a kid, I used to hate being an only child. Mm-hmm. That was part of it, but I was like, okay. And I didn't care that much for it. But one of the things is as I've gotten older, I like to meet people and hang out with people, but I like being able to come back to my space and just be me. Yeah.
So I think sometimes as only children, we become introverts because we're so used to that space. And like you said, for me, if I spend a couple of days with people, I need to get away from you.
There you go. That's me. That's enough is enough. Yeah. You can only see a person so long. That's right.
I even tell people when I travel, I'm going to disappear. I'm not mad. I'm good, but I need to be away from you for a little bit because I need to recharge because that every minute somebody's there, that drives me crazy. Again, talking about being an only child, you mentioned a little bit, how has being an only child also impacted your life?
It's made me appreciate people a lot more. Quality people. It's helped me to appreciate those folks. It's also helped me to appreciate some of the simpler things in life, I think, as well. It doesn't take all of that to make me happy. Whereas, I think that if I was trying to impress somebody or that kind of thing, I would be wanting more or shooting for more. I mean, I'm driven, but not by impressing somebody else.
Right.
It's I want to do what I can do for the betterment of whatever my focus is at that time. Yeah.
I think that's a good quality to have because again, I think as only children, we are focused because growing up as an only child, you didn't have distractions or brothers and sisters or family members, and you're focused on whatever it is that you're trying to get done. And I think I guess that's just the quality of who we are as only children.
Right, right. Well, and I have to admit that I was kind of a different only child from what people perceive only children as being. Because I wasn't, they always said, well, we know you're being an only child, you spoiled, you got what you wanted, you did, and that wasn't the case for me.
Mm,
My dad was a taskmaster. And I mean, not a bad one, but he believed in work. He believed in being busy. He believed in doing things. And I got that quality from him. And so, it wasn't, you had to work for what you wanted. But the
right.
one thing about it was that my parents, they did try to do some things for me. And I was the kind of kid, though, that I said, nah, that's okay. I don't need that. I don't want that. It didn't take all that to make me happy. I just keep going. And so that was, some of my cousins and friends would say, you're crazy. Because they want to do this for you, and you sit up here fighting them because they want to give you stuff. I said, there's no need of me getting it just to have it. What good is it gonna do if I don't want it? So, yeah.
But that also kind of leads me to my next question. What are some of the other life lessons you learned from watching your parents?
Hard work was one thing. Is that it pays off in the long run.
Mm,
Also, uh, giving. I learned to be a giver by watching them. They gave till it hurt, pretty much.
mm,
They gave, but it was all honest. It wasn't for the show or for any kind of recognition, but it was just who they were, and
mm.
they believed in sharing and giving, and being concerned about others, and doing to help the community as a whole. Not about it was never about them, and
Mm.
I think that was the one thing that I picked up from them probably more than anything else was, you know, giving of myself and trying to help others to be the best they could be.
When you speak of giving, you you're leading me all into a lot of my questions. So I thank you. You also had a lengthy career in education before requiring. Talk about your journey as an educator and a principal. Again, when we talk about that giving, what was that like for you?
Well, it was the journey started kind of, it was not what I wanted to do.
Mm,
My goal when I got out of high school is I wanted to be a chemist, and I wanted to do math and be a chemist. Well, through a whole lot of situations, I ended up not doing the chemistry, and I ended up being a history, was being my second major. I always was the math, but I still didn't want to be a teacher because my mom had been one for all those years, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And so she sat me down one day and she said, well, I tell you what, why don't you just go and do your student teaching? And if you don't like it, okay, go and do what you want to do, but at least give yourself that option.
hmm
So I said, okay, I'll do that. And I did. And I fell in love with it because I enjoyed the kids. And I did. And I had options when being that I was a math major, I had options because I even got a job making my original job as a teacher in Texas. The base salary started out was $9,000.
Wow.
And that was in 1978. And I had another job offer from a telephone company that's going to pay me $25,000 a year. And all I had to do was drive around and look at telephone poles. And I took the teaching job. People thought I was crazy, but I was like, I want to be happy.
hmm
If I'm gonna work, I need to be happy at what I'm doing. And for some reason, I like the teaching. So I did that. I taught math for 6 years. And then Of course, they didn't do things the way I thought it ought to be done in some cases. So I said, if I'm the principal, then I can change it and do it the way it needs to be done for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it was all about for the kids.
Right.
And so I love teaching math, but I felt like I could have a bigger impact if I was the principal. So I went and got my certification, got that done, did all that, and then I started working. And I taught for 6 years, and then the rest of those years, the next 20 whatever year, 24 years, I was a principal. And I mean I was the head principal 22 of those 24 years. And but I enjoyed that. I love the kids. Now the grown people, I'll be honest, they got on my nerves. But the kids, I loved them. They were wonderful. There were bad ones in the group, of course. But the bottom line was all of them really just wanted some attention and some love and things they were not getting at home or other places. And so, and you wonder when you do that, people always wonder, well, they say teachers get off in the summertime, but that's not true because they have to work during the summertime to get ready for the next year. So, it's a 24/7 job as well. I figured out one time I was making $1.35 an hour. That was about it for the time I was putting in. But it was all out of love. And you think, well, what is the benefit of that? What do you get in the end?
Mm-hmm.
The end is probably the best of all because at that point, if you've done a great job as a teacher, it'll come back to you through those kids you taught. They will show up in some of the strangest places. You will see them, or they'll see you, and then they'll bring up, you remember when you said this, and so. And I think my biggest realization that when Facebook came into being,
mm-hmm.
and all these kids I taught over the years, they found me on there, and then they would tell me stories about things I said and did.
Wow.
And then I, being a math teacher, I did a thing where I always had them to tell me how they were going to use math in their everyday lives, in their professions.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them would, I don't use math. Even one kid told me he wanted to be a bum. I said, okay, find a bum, ask them how they use math. Well, after that, he decided he wanted to be a bum. But the thing was, though, is that most of those kids, though, that I taught, they went into professions that dealt with math.
Wow.
Which made me feel really good because that means that I had an impact on where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. And so that probably has been the one thing. That's what money can't buy. That pays, even though days when I don't have any money, I have those memories, and that's what keeps me going and know that teaching is important. I look at the legislators now that are out there making these rules. They've never been in a classroom. They have no clue what it meant, what teachers have to go through. And I feel like that's such a big disservice for them to be able to make decisions about education because they don't know what we have to deal with or had to deal with. And how can they make, unless they walk in those shoes, how can they make those kinds of decisions? So, but education to me has been a blessing and I love it. I loved it.
You talked a little bit earlier about uh, the challenge of the parents and the challenge of the students. What were like some of the common challenges you saw that students face during the time that you were an educator, and what was your role in helping students overcome those challenges?
Well, I taught middle school and sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade math mainly. And the bottom line is that if you learn sixth grade math, you can pretty much do everything else. That sixth grade math is the place where all the functions come together, and then you go from there with the rest of it. So a lot of times I go back and work on foundation. We went back and learned how to do multiplication tables and how to multiply, how to add, how to subtract. But teach it to them where they could think with their head and not with a piece of paper. A lot of the basic skills that they needed to learn. I go back and we learn those. I even have kids now, and they're in their 50s. When they see me, they walk up to me and recite stuff that I taught them in the sixth grade. But it was because I drilled it into them. That was on every test, on everything we did. They had to be able to know these because they were the foundations of what they had to know in math. And then they were able then to take some of those foundations and use them in the sciences, in some of the English, in other classes as well. But that was the biggest challenge that I had was and also to teach them that they could do math. So many kids felt like they couldn't do math.
Wow.
And I told them, I said, you couldn't even go to the bathroom if you can't do math. And they look at me crazy and go, why you say that? I said, you have to figure out how many steps it takes to get from where you are to the bathroom. If you can't do that, how you gonna do it? And they thought, well, no, I said, that's what math is. You live it every day. You just don't think about it. And I said, and so when they tell me something they would do, I would turn it into a word problem because most kids said, I can't do word problems. And I go, yes, you can. And so then I would let them know, give them the problem. And based on what they tell me they were doing, and I would show them, this is a word problem. And they go, oh, so I can do word. And once they got past that hump of knowing that they could, it was, they had more confidence and they could do it most of the time with not too much trouble.
Wow. Let's change subjects. 1989, you married Gwendolyn.
Mm-hmm.
What does having her in your life mean to you?
It has been an experience, the best way to put it. After, being single for 30 some years at that point, it has been, it's been interesting because being an only child is interesting because you're used to doing things by yourself, with yourself, and having to learn how to share your intimate thoughts as well as all that can be a challenge sometimes. And so that's probably been one of those things because I still wanted my space
right
during that time period as well. But then you had to learn how to share it with somebody else and those kind of things.
So it's interesting you would say that because I got married at 32 and I didn't understand sharing. So I feel you on that. What do you mean I got to tell you where I'm going or who I'm hanging out with?
Yeah.
What do you mean I got to come home and we got to talk? I don't feel like talking right now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to overcome that in your years of marriage, to overcome that being able to share? How did you handle within yourself? Okay, I need to step back and I need to kind of give her more of me.
Sharing was not necessarily the problem for me. I mean, I didn't mind sharing I had to first accept that I was going to have to do that. But once I got to that point, that part was not the problem. Now, the biggest problem is what was probably working with in making decisions. I had to say, okay, I got to consider somebody else when I make this decision. How is it going to affect them as well? And so I had to work with myself on that. That was probably the toughest part of that, and everything. But I got over it pretty easily because she's pretty strong minded. So it meant, it was kind of one of those kind of, we go head to head, but we eventually get to a decision.
So if you were to have a conversation with a young single man that's about to get married in his 30s, what advice would you give him?
Are you sure that's what you want to do? That's exactly what I'd say. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And I would ask, I said, if you're not willing to necessarily just pretty much give up your life, don't do it because it's not going to be with the stresses of life as they are. You got to be willing. You got to understand it's going to be you're going to be stressed out, and so the question is can you deal with that?
Right.
And so I just be honest with them because there's no need of trying to sugarcoat it. With marriages, it's supposed to be a wonderful thing, but to get into that wonderful thing part is a problem, a challenge and a problem.
I remember when I told my mother I was getting married, she asked me a question: Why do you want to take care of somebody else's child? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in a marriage, especially as a man, the responsibility of having to take care of that woman, that's a lot of stress on a man. Did you feel that stress? You kind of talked about your decision making.
Yes,
So how
I
did you
did.
handle that stress?
I don't know if I ever really did. I mean, just be honest. I don't know if I did ever did because the thing about it was not only that. See, I was the principal of the high school at the same time, so
Hmm.
I was dealing with two stresses. So and that just only added to it. I got through it, but it was a mini night. I lay there going, okay, am I sure this is what I should have done? You know. I just, I'll be honest, it was tough.
Yeah, marriage can have challenges. We've been
But
talking.
marriage is a challenge. It
Yeah,
can't, it doesn't necessarily have them. It is. I mean,
yeah.
because you bring in two independent people together. I don't care how much they love each other, but they still are two independent people trying to mesh as one. And that, and that's the job.
It takes a lot of prayer, a lot of fasting, and a lot of God, and a lot of give and take.
That's
Um,
it.
I've heard somebody say marriage isn't 50-50. Some days it's going to be 90-10. Some days it's going to
Yeah,
be 80-20.
it's never 50-50. I'm sorry. It's somebody's always on the giving end and somebody is on the other end. It's always gonna be, even if it's 50, not 51-49, it's never, I've never known of a situation where it's been straight up.
No, it never will be.
Hmm.
We've been talking a little bit again about you being an only child. So this is the next random question. What is your favorite thing to do by yourself?
That's a good question. What do I like to do by myself? I guess listen to the radio.
Okay.
I That was my growing up. That was my retreat place. That was a place where my private place where I could lose myself was in my music.
Hmm.
And that was just listen. I mean, back way back there in the 70s, there was not a song that would come on the radio that I didn't know. I could tell you, I'd hear that name, that tunes, I could have played on that. Because I was pretty much that good. I could just take my and roll it through and tell you every song that was playing. But that was because I was into that, and that was my getaway.
So was it R&B, gospel? What were you
All
listening
of
to?
it,
All
pretty
of it?
much. Yeah, pretty much all of it. There wasn't too many ways you could miss me. Gospel, pop, R&B, any pretty much you couldn't hardly miss me.
Well, back in the 70s, radio was different because you had a lot of local radio announcers that kind of played what they wanted to, and
Right
so you could hear, you knew the Beatles as well as you knew the Temptations.
there, you go. That's
Yeah.
it. See, yeah.
So after you retired, you became a travel agent. How are you able to make people's dreams come true through your travel agency?
Well, when I retired, my goal was to travel and see the world.
Hmm.
I was only 51 years old at that time, and I was trying to figure out what was I going to do. And I said, well, I want to travel. And so just so have a friend of mine talked to me about that there at that time there was a network marketing program was out there that was promoting travel. So I said, oh, that's just right on time. So they gave you the option that you could go and get your travel agent certification per se. So
Hmm.
I said, well, that's right up my alley. That's what I want to do. So I said, let me do that. Um, and I thought, well, okay, it's gonna help me because I'll learn about the travel business so that when we start traveling, I'll be able to go without it being a problem. I'll know everything, have kind of the inside on it. And the other part was I thought, well, I was already doing it. Everybody wanted to take a trip, they call me and go, well, can you always seem to be able to find these good deals. Can you find this for me to help me go so and so, so and so? So I'd say, okay, let me help you, whatever. And so that's what I started doing. So I was already doing that even before that. So I said, well, I just legitimize it by being a travel agent. So I had to come up with a name. And I said, I'm always making other people's dreams come true for their travel. And I went, that'd be a good name for me. So that's kind of how I got there. So that's what I did. And I
So
still do.
what are some misconceptions people have about traveling?
That they can just make up their mind today that they're going to go somewhere tomorrow. And you can do it, but you're going to pay for it out the kazoo because you didn't plan in advance, and you have to plan in advance to save money. Now, if you just get an inkling you want to go do something, okay, yeah, you can do that. But if you want to enjoy it, be able to do things without being stressed, you really need to plan what you're going to do. When you're going, how you're going, what you're going to do when you get there, all those things. But that's one of the big things that I think people have the misconception of is that I can do, the other side. Well, I want to go and I need a passport. I can go get it tomorrow. No, if you don't have a passport, it could take up to 6 to 8 weeks or longer to get one. So you gotta wait till it's time to go, get that, and then you can go, but you can't go anywhere till then.
So you mentioned traveling outside of the country. What are some of your favorite places that you visited?
I think last year's trip probably was the best. I went to Scotland.
Wow.
It was fabulous. I went with some of my relatives. People I had known all my life, some of them, but I didn't realize we didn't know that we were related. I did an ancestry DNA thing. We found out we were related. And so they were going to Scotland and they said, you want to go? And at first I said, no, I'm not going. And then I found out, I said, you know what? I'm 66 years old. I need to do this. So I did that. I, made my reservations and I had a blast. We were there for like 10 days. I learned I was out of shape. I learned that much for sure, if nothing else, in some of the adventures we went on. But other than that, I enjoyed that. That was great to see a place of that. You read about these places and you hear about them, but to actually see it, it was like, oh, this is really what this is. But driving on the other side of the road too that was a nightmare for me at first because I was sitting in the van and I was sitting in the front seat and I dozed off to sleep. So when I woke up, this car was coming toward us, but it was on the other side, of course. And I was screaming, and they thought, and I thought about it. I said, "Oh, I'm not at home," because I thought the car was going to run into us. So that was a something I had to get used to, but it was a great experience.
So what place is on your bucket list of where you want to travel now?
I want to go to Italy.
Okay.
That's the top place, and I'd like to go to Germany just to see it, but I really want to go to Italy. Being that I was a history major, that was my second major. There are a lot of places that I'd love to see, but I think if I go to Italy and Greece, those areas they cover a lot of those places I really want to see.
Now you none of these are my questions, but I love traveling also. Now you mentioned traveling with your newfound family. How are you okay traveling by yourself?
Yeah, I can do that too. I haven't really done it, but I've done some of it. But I'm not afraid to go by myself. It just never seems to work out when I try to set it up like that. But I don't mind traveling because again, I try to plan out where I'm going and what I'm doing and know where I'm getting myself into before I get there. I have an idea because there's always going to be something come up that's going to mess it up, and you mess up your plans. But I try to have everything as much as I can worked out.
So you're the traveler that you need an itinerary of everything you're going to do when you get there. At least have something in mind that you want to do, but if something comes up that's different.
Right.
Definitely agree with that. Definitely agree. Again, I love traveling. I'm almost at hitting all 50 states. By September of this year, I'm going to be at 50 states. My 50th state is going to be Hawaii. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
something else that we have in common.
Yeah, and you know, I hadn't until today, believe it or not, I hadn't realized that I had gone to. I have some states I haven't been to, but I hadn't realized I'd been to that many states until I was talking to this other guy, and he was asking me, he said, "You been here?" And I went, "Yeah." You been there? He said, "You almost have made all the 50 states," and I went, "I guess I have. I never really thought about it, you know. I just
it's,
go where I need to go and do what I have to do."
it's funny because maybe about 5 years ago, I realized how close I was. So every year I would plan trips for like the past 5 years to get me closer. So right now I'm at 46 states. I'm going to hit
Okay.
three more in July and then Hawaii in September for my 65th birthday. And then I have all 50 states. And
Oh, good. You still young. Still young. Okay.
I've done like Vermont, Seattle,
Yeah, see
Portland.
that's what I hadn't. I haven't been to Vermont or Idaho or Montana. I haven't been up in that area. Utah. I haven't been over there. You know that kind of thing. Now Seattle, I've done. Oregon, I haven't. But yeah.
So last month I did a trip. I flew into Montana, drove to Yellowstone, left Yellowstone, drove to Idaho Falls, and then went to Salt Lake City and then flew back home.
Ah, okay.
It was about 4 hours of driving each day, but I was cool with it because I had a goal because I wanted to see all these areas
Right.
and cross it off my list. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Sounds cool. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. You're the co-owner of All Nations TV. Talk about the purpose of the TV station.
Okay. Let me start out by how I got started because I
Okay.
think that will help with the purpose. When I started the TV station, I was supposed to be the silent partner.
Okay.
There were four of us that three people had been doing cable TV. I was just asked originally I was not going to do this, and they said, "Well, why don't you come along and you can be the silent partner?" Because I told them I know nothing about TV and I don't want to do that. And so then they convinced me, and so we went ahead and started All Nations TV. That was when Roku first came into being,
Mm,
back during that time period. And the guy who really was the basic dream of this whole process, he had been doing cable for a while, and he says, well, cable's on its way out as far as TV goes, and now there's this new technology, Roku. He said, really would like to try to do that. And I said, well, as long as I don't have to do anything, that's fine. I just contribute whatever. Well, he and the other two people were still working. I had retired.
mhm.
So they would say, well, we need you to do this and we need you to do that. And I would do stuff. And it just so happened I was taking care of my mom at the time because she had had a stroke. So while I was sitting there at the hospital, I would try to do things. So as more I did, the less they did. And so I would end up, by the end of the first year, I was doing most everything that was need to be done. But the purpose, though, that we had with All Nations TV, when we first met to talk about it, we tried to come up with what was missing on the in the internet level of TV at the time. And there was TBN and some of the other ones out there. But what was missing? And we said that, we wanted something that a TV station that would service the world, but we wanted to be able to reach people, all over the world, but we wanted to give them quality programming
Mhm.
all the time. Because we had run into people, we had talked to people that were on other internet type programs, and they were late at night, whatever. So if you wanted to see them, you had to stay up to 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, that
Right.
kind of thing. So what we did, we came up with the concept of, well, why don't we have a show that's shown more than one time a week, but we'll do it since the clock has four different quadrants. Why don't we have a show? It's shown in each one of the quadrants, not on the same day, but throughout. So we set up a matrix type of setup that would allow you to do that. And the young man who put it together, who was the original founder of this, he came up with that idea, and we thought, well, that's neat. So that's one thing. But the other thing, most important too, was that we wanted to have the type of program that would allow anybody who had a desire to do ministry to give them the opportunity to be able to be on the network. Right. We didn't want it to be all the major name programming. We wanted to give the mom and pop and the local people the opportunity, if they wanted to be a part, they could, and have their ministry just as well. And so that was what we tried to go with to make happen. And that was probably that's the one goal we tried to stick with more than anything else over the years.
So what are some of the names of some of the programs that are featured on All Nations TV?
Well, some of the main, I guess ones people like, we have Tony Evans, we have, I can't think of them all right now, but we've got a lot of the major Perry, Stone. We've got some of those that you see on some of the other stations, but we also have shows with some of the local people. We have like Ricky Paul. We have some people out of the Dallas area. We have people, throughout the country that are just local. They have local shows that are just getting started, mm-hmm. and they have the desire to take their ministries to the next level. So we're giving them that platform to be able to do that.
Again, in reading your bio, one of the things that stuck out with me was how the TV station connected you with a lot of independent gospel artists. What are some of the things you learned about independent artists and how you could help them through All Nations TV?
Well, when I first started doing this, like I said, I didn't know anything about TV, had no clue. Mm-hmm. And then like I said, one of the co-founders, he would put videos on, as fillers in between shows. And then we started getting independent artists to reach out to me or reach out to us to say, can you show our video? Can you have it on the network? And so as I started to do that and programming them, we started having conversations, and I started talking with them, and I was finding out about some of the interesting things that they were having to deal with in the music industry. Mm-hmm. And it really disturbed me, because being the educator that I am, it just, I was concerned about some things. One of the things I really was concerned about was that they didn't seem to connect. For instance, I would ask them, I had a list. When they called and we talked, I had a list. Do you know so-and-so? Have you heard of this person? Do you know how to reach this person? Do you even know what this is? And I found out that the educational side of things was missing. Mm-hmm. They didn't seem to know a lot of the foundational things, or people I thought that would be important to help them take the ministry to the other level. And so that's how I started then to get more into the music side and trying to find ways to help bring them together and to educate them about the music business.
Speaking of education with the music business, you're also the president of the recently launched East Texas Gospel Music Professional, a chapter of the Gospel Industry Network. What's the purpose of this organization?
To educate artists, help them with their foundation, mm-hmm. to help them to understand the music business as a whole, to provide a platform for them to be able to practice their craft and and what they're singing, to help them to then take their music to the next level, to help them to advance in the music business as a whole. But the main thing is to educate them about the business so that they can make wise decisions.
So, I mean, I've been in the indie artist side of it also. What are some of when you talk to artists, what are some of the things, you kind of talked a little bit about, how you're surprised how they don't know, but how can you help people to get on that right path? What does that conversation sound like for them? For the indie artists?
The first thing that I do to them, I said, okay, they'll say, well, I need, I'm working on my music, blah, 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 whatever they say. Then my first question is, okay, have you released a single? Yes. Okay. I'll say, where can I find you? Well, you can find me on all the digital outlets. That's usually the first answer. So then I go to Spotify and I see, can I find them there? Sometimes I do. Every now and then I don't. And I'll go, okay, we got a problem here. I can't find you. How there's a problem. Maybe there's two Carl B. Phillips, or there's a Carl Phillips where we got a problem here. But then I look to see, do you have a blue dot by your name? If they don't have a blue dot by their name on Spotify, I go, okay, they don't know this business. That's the giveaway right there.
Right.
And I said, okay, we got a problem here. Then I click right over and go to Sound Exchange. And then I go, can I find you on Sound Exchange? If I can't find you there, I say, whoa, stop right there. We can't go any further. We need to go back to square one, and we need to figure out what's going on. And that's generally where I start. Then we move on talking about ISRC codes and all those things. But only after, if they can't pass those two, if they can't get past, the music can't get past those two things, then we go back to square one and let's dissect what you've done and let's see why we got a miss and what we got to do to straighten it out. I tell people all the time, I feel like I'm like the hospital. I'm the emergency room. They come to me all broke up, misused, abused, and I work with them and help put them back together.
It's so interesting because, again, with me being in the indie artist space and then dealing with a lot of indie artists now, when people come to you, they have these great dreams of they're going to sell 1 million records, they're going to travel the
Right.
world. But then when you start breaking down what's involved, the reality side of it, I believe in God too. Yeah, but there's still work you have to do.
That's right. They say God called me to sing. Okay, that's wonderful. But now there's a business side of this, and if you don't do the business side, then you have to understand you're not gonna make any money. You're not gonna get anything out of it financially from that side. It's all because you love to sing is what you're gonna have to live off because it's not gonna happen. Anyway, I tell people it's like think of it as a water line. It goes from the time you sing the song to the end when you get paid. Anything if you haven't done all the pieces in between, all the water and all the money runs out right there. You lose it.
Well, the industry has changed so much.
Yes.
You and I have been around quite a while where, streaming, you don't make any money. If you don't have a hit song, you can't go out and tour. So there's realities out there that we're dealing with. What other advice would you give to an indie artist?
The first thing I tell them is that, okay, you got to decide, why are you doing this? Are you doing it for the money? Or are you doing it because you want to minister? Because they're different.
Right.
If your motive is one, if your purpose is one thing, then because ministry costs. That's one thing I tell them my ministry costs. It's not, you think of it as being that, that it's a gimme, but it costs, even with the television part, I have to explain to them that ministry does cost. It's not cheap. And it's something you have to give not only your time, but also your money to make it work like you want it to work or do what you want it to do. So I try to start with them there and let them know that, and I tell them, if you're doing it for the money, something wrong with you anyway, because you have to, your purpose for getting into this should not have been for the money. It was because you wanted to minister and do those kinds of things. The money is the blessing on the other side of the extra blessing, but the being able to fulfill that desire within you to promote God and sing the music that He's giving you, that should be the driving force.
So tell me, what's next for Milton Wallace?
That's a good question. I really don't know. This was not what I had planned on doing. Number one, and so I'm just open to whatever God has planned at this point, because I'm definitely not doing what I wanted to do, what I in my mind had wanted to do, and he had a different plan than what I did,
Mm.
and so I'm just kind of open. The big thing for me is that I enjoy helping people.
Right.
I enjoy being a blessing. I don't do it for the name or for any of the fame or the anything it might give me. That's not what I do stuff for. I do it to see. I always tell people my favorite TV, one of my favorite TV shows was the A-Team.
Mm.
And the only reason why I was so crazy about it was at the end of the show. George Papard always said, I love it when a plan comes together. And I do. I've always seen the being at, if there was a challenge, I usually be sitting in the middle of it somewhere.
Mm.
And I love being able to be a problem solver from that standpoint. Getting older like I am, I don't like solving problems as much as I used to. But I do like trying to help people be successful. When I see people successful, I win with
Right.
that. That's my reward. People always say, what you think you're gonna get out of it? I don't want the money. I just want to know that you were able to do what you wanted to do. If we can accomplish that, then I win as well. I like those kinds of things. I like seeing people be successful, be happy, do things they need to do. So as far as any specific thing that I want to do, I don't know, because I like working so much that it's hard for me to say, well, I don't want to travel and see the world. Well, if I'm working and traveling, maybe so. But just straight out traveling, I don't know, how that's gonna work out. Because that's a lot of free time. I did that one time. I took a week off and didn't do anything. By the end of that week, I was so sick, I was ready to go to the hospital. I went outside and jumped on the tractor and started mowing. I was okay then. But it was, I thought, okay, this lets me know I'm gonna have to. I'm not gonna be able to sit around the house and just do nothing. That's not who I am. I've
It,
got to be busy doing something, and helping people is my, um, I guess, driving one of my driving forces.
it's interesting. I think we as men, as we get older, if we don't stay active physically and mentally, you kind of dry up.
Yes,
And I know I'm kind of like you. Let me find something new that I can do. Let me find something else that I can do. Even in my 60s, let me figure out something new.
right.
You know, and I think a lot of times, like, when men retire, if they don't have anything, they
They
don't
don't
have
last
life.
long.
They
They
don't live
don't
long.
last long.
They don't last long because for men, working is what keeps us going. So I'm honored to have this conversation with you because you give me an example of something I can continue to do as I get older.
Well, yeah, and you get tired. You get like, I don't want to do this today. You get up next morning, and go, okay, let's go do it. But at the end of the day, you're going, I don't want to do that anymore. But again, I look back over the successes that I've had in life, the things that and it's always been when I've done things with the right motive to help people to be better people. That is when I've achieved my best.
Mm.
And I thank God that He's given me the ability to do that. And that's I always said my grandfather was a minister. My dad was the deacon at the church, one of the deacons at the church. My mom was a musician. So I lived in the church, and I prayed, Lord, please don't let me be the preacher. I don't want to be a preacher. I don't mind doing whatever else, but I don't want to be a preacher. But I love helping people. I love servicing people. Love helping them to be successful in what they do. And so that's what I just want my life to be a blessing to help others to see God if number one,
Mm.
and to see, and to see the best that they can see in themselves as well.
How can people watch All Nations TV? How can they contact you? And how can they follow you on social media?
Okay, they can see me on all. They can see All Nations TV by going to the internet, going to www.allnationswithanstv.com. with an S, TV.com. Allnationstv.com. That's one way. They can also go on Roku. We have our own station on Roku, so they can go to the station All Nations TV, be able to, sign in there, or they can. And we're working on getting an app. Our app is almost up and running again. We had some problems there, but we're getting the app back where they can download it onto their phone or whatever device they have and be able to do. But it's always look us up. It's All Nations TV is how they can find us. Social media wise, they can find me on Facebook, of course. They can find it if they'll look. It's kind of interesting on there because I'm listed that we have some All Nation TV pages there, but we also, if you want to know what's going on All Nations TV, if you come to my page, it's Milton Wallace, my name, but you'll find it either with the A and T in the middle. People go, "What is that funny looking logo you have on your page?" And it's a purple ant. Is what it is. It might look like I don't know what it looks like to other people, but it's purple and for royalty, but it's an ant for ANT, All Nations TV. So they can find that page. Yeah.
Oh,
So they can do is Milton Ant Wallace, or they can find me at Milton Wallace and the ants on the other side. So those are the two pages that we have. But I post a lot of things about the station on there, as well as other things that are going on as well. So that's the way they can find me there. We have a page on Instagram as well. And don't do TikTok now. That's a little bit, I'm a little older for that. So I'm not ready for TikTok.
I feel you on that.
But those are the places they can find us on social media as well.
So thank you for explaining the ant, because I thought it was for Anthony with a middle name.
Oh, no. No, like I said, we sit down, the very first meeting we had as a team, we sit down and come up with what we're going to call this. And that's how we came up with the All Nations, because we wanted it to work with the whole world. And then we said, well, what is going to be our logo? We had all kinds of ideas and whatever. But finally said, A-N-T, what if we just had an ant for the, and everybody go, well, what is it going to look like? And that's how we came up with the purple. And it's worked so far, so it gets a lot of questions asked, if nothing else.
Because I've always wondered that, as long as I've known of you and known of the TV station, it just never clicked.
Yeah, I know. People go, that's what that is. Yeah, that's what.
So before we wrap up, speak to someone about the importance of pursuing excellence no matter their age.
When I was a principal, the one thing that I had a school that was pretty good school, but it lacked some character at the time. And we had to come up with a logo or a motto for our school. And it was that we took it out for I think when Lexus first came out, it was in the ultimate pursuit of excellence. And that was what we used for the school. Mm-hmm. And my kids, they gravitated around that, and everything. And we had an exemplary school because of that. One of the few, but we had that. And that's kind of the way I am in life. I'm constantly pursuing excellence and everything that you do. You can't, you can't just be excellent in one thing and slough off in everything else. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be excellent, striving and driving for excellence, you have to do that every day in everything that you do. You keep God first, number one. That's going to help you in that excellence drive that you're trying to get to. But you got to stay focused on where you're going. And you might not always know where you're going, but you need to stay in the road at least. I always tell people that, it might be a little hairy there for a minute. Life is going to throw curves at you. There's going to be a lot of things, but you have to keep pushing toward a goal that, and that you're going to do the best you can do every day. And when you wake up every morning, you thank God for that opportunity. Then you step out and you give it everything you have, so that when you do shut your eyes, that day. If you don't wake up the next morning, you went out doing the best you could be. And I think if you give your best every day, then the excellence will come with it. But you got to give your best. I know some days you just don't feel like it, but you got to do the best you can and keep pushing, because it's not, life is tough. If people said life is easy, then something's wrong. They're not living life right, because life is tough. If you're doing a great job at it.
Thank you so much for that great advice. We are talking with Milton Wallace. He's from All Nations TV. Again, go to allnationstv.com, go to Roku, watch the station, follow him on social media so you can learn more about the East Texas Gospel Music Professionals, which is a chapter of Gospel Industry Network. He's a man full of knowledge, so make sure you check him out. And as we close, I always like to close this way by saying this: remember to work like you don't need the money, love like you've never been hurt, and dance like no one's watching you. God bless until we have a chance to meet again. Remember, go watch All Nations TV. God bless.
The Carl B. Phillips Show is produced by Carl B. Phillips for Prove Me Productions. For more information about Carl B. Phillips, visit carlbphillips.com. Subscribe to The Carl B. Phillips Show on YouTube or your favorite podcast outlet.